You can't make yourself care anymore. The goals that once drove you now feel pointless. The passions that once gave you life now feel dead. You wake up and everything seems hollow, as if the world lost its meaning overnight. Carl Jung understood this exact experience. He called it the death of the provisional life. This isn't depression. It's the moment your old self dies, so your real self can finally wake up. Today, you'll learn Jung's 5 hidden reasons why spiritual awakening destroys motivation, and why this destruction isn't a curse. It's the beginning of authentic action, because what you've lost wasn't real motivation. It was control, and it had to die. Before spiritual awakening, most of us live inside a story we didn't write. We chase dreams, climb ladders, and build lives that seem full of meaning. But underneath, something quiet and hollow keeps whispering, "This isn't it." You thought your job was about purpose and contribution, but if you look closer, it was about proving you are worthy of being seen. You thought love was about connection, but it was really about escaping the terror of being alone with yourself. You thought success was about growth, but it was your attempt to silence the old voice that said, "You're not enough." Carl Jung called these illusions substitute purposes. They are psychological masks, goals that seem noble on the surface but secretly serve emotional wounds buried deep in the unconscious. We build our lives around them, never realizing they were never truly ours. You may think you chose your career, your ambitions, your relationships, but most of them were chosen for you, constructed by invisible forces, childhood insecurity, cultural pressure, and the silent expectations of people whose approval you once craved. These false purposes give the ego structure. They make you feel like life has direction. They create motion, but not meaning. And when awakening comes, it pulls the curtain down. Suddenly, what once gave your life excitement starts to look empty. The promotion, the praise, the achievement, all feel strangely dead. It's not because you've become lazy or emotionless. It's because your consciousness has outgrown the illusion that fed you. Jung wrote, "When symbols lose their power, the person discovers they were chasing shadows. You see through the game. The success you worked for was never about joy. It was about healing. The relationships you clung to were never about love. They were about filling a void. The dreams you sacrificed for were never truly yours. They were inherited from others." When that realization hits, your entire internal architecture collapses. The mind that used to run on approval and goals no longer knows where to go. This is why awakening feels like death, because something is dying, the identity built on false meaning. And in that death comes a terrifying silence. You wake up, and nothing excites you anymore. Every direction feels pointless because you can now see the hidden wound behind every desire. But here's the truth Jung wanted us to see. This emptiness isn't punishment, it's liberation. It's the moment the machinery of false motivation finally stops spinning. It's the sacred pause between who you were and who you're becoming. The ego calls it failure. The soul calls it freedom. You're not losing direction. You're losing delusion. You're not becoming lazy. You're becoming real. And in that raw silence, when the false purposes are gone, something new begins to form. Not from fear, not from approval, but from authenticity. That's the beginning of true purpose. Not something borrowed from culture or family, but something whispered by your deeper self. A quiet, effortless sense of movement that doesn't come from need, but from being aligned with what is real. So if your old goals have lost their meaning, if your ambitions have turned to dust, If you feel like you're standing in the ruins of everything that once drove you, understand this: you are not broken. You are standing in the space where truth is born. Let the old structure fall. Let the map burn. It was never leading you home anyway. The emptiness you feel is not the end of meaning. It's the beginning of real life. Before awakening, your mind was a prisoner of time. You lived between two illusions: the past that haunted you and the future that promised salvation. Every thought, every action, every emotion was stretched across that tension between what was and what could be. You thought you were moving forward, but in truth you were only running in circles inside your own mind. The past whispered guilt, regret, nostalgia, and the future lured you with fantasies of redemption. You weren't living, you were waiting for the right job, the right partner, the right version of yourself, waiting for the day when your life would finally begin. And so the present moment became nothing more than a corridor, a means to an imagined destination. But awakening destroys that illusion. It collapses the timeline your ego built to give itself meaning. You realize there is no future to chase, no past to fix, only now. This sudden confrontation with timelessness is what Jung referred to as temporal vertigo, the dizzying disorientation when the psychological scaffolding of time falls away. You lose the emotional rhythm you've always known. No goals, no deadlines, no sense of later. At first, this feels like paralysis. You stop planning because the future seems hollow. You stop chasing because better no longer exists somewhere else. The very things that once gave you drive, ambition, urgency, anticipation, dissolve. It feels as if something inside you has died, and in a sense it has. The time-bound self. Society, however, is built on this illusion of time. People talk endlessly about 5-year plans, retirement goals, and next steps. The entire structure of civilization depends on human beings believing in tomorrow. But when you awaken, you can no longer play along. You can't pretend to care about a future that feels like smoke. The motivational slogans that once inspired you, grind now, shine later, suddenly sound absurd. This stage is not depression. It is deprogramming. You are no longer running from pain, nor reaching for pleasure in some future scene. You are being pulled into presence, and presence doesn't operate in hours or years. It flows. It responds. It acts without reference to time. You begin to notice small things: the sound of your breath, the way light moves across the room, the way silence feels alive. And from this stillness, something miraculous begins. Action without striving. This is what mystics call effortless doing. Action that rises naturally from awareness, not from fear of loss or hunger for gain. You no longer move to become. You move because you are. When psychological time ends, what replaces it is not laziness. It is spontaneity. You begin to live like nature itself. The river doesn't rush to reach the ocean. It flows because flowing is its essence. The tree doesn't hurry to grow. It unfolds because unfolding is what it is. You are returning to that same rhythm, the eternal rhythm of being. Eckhart Tolle wrote, "Time is what keeps everything from happening at once." But in the stillness of the present, everything is happening at once. To the unweakened, that sounds like madness. To the awakened, it feels like coming home. You no longer run out of time because you are beyond it. You stop measuring your worth in achievements or years. You no longer ask, "What will I do with my life?" Because life itself, this moment, is the answer. Before awakening, Your life was a scoreboard. Everything, your looks, your success, your intelligence, your worth, existed only in contrast to someone else. You didn't just want to grow. You wanted to win. You didn't want to be good. You wanted to be better. That invisible ladder of comparison gave your ego a direction, a sense of identity, and a reason to move. Someone else's victory felt like your loss. Someone else's failure felt like your relief. Your entire sense of self was built on measurement, constant calibration against the world. And so, you ran, faster, harder, always chasing an ideal that was never real. But awakening shatters this illusion. You begin to see the insanity of comparison itself. How could you ever compare two beings when no two journeys are the same? The mountain and the sea do not compete. The rose does not envy the oak. Each simply is. Once you glimpse this truth, competition begins to die. Not because you've won, but because you finally see there was never a race. The finish line was an illusion, painted by the ego. And when that illusion fades, what remains is an immense stillness. At first, this feels like loss, the loss of drive, ambition, and purpose. The very fuel that once kept you alive, the desire to be more, evaporates. You stand in silence, stripped of every comparison, and feel nothing. But this nothingness is not emptiness. It is freedom. Because for the first time, you no longer need to prove your existence through being better than anyone, not even your past self. Even your personal timeline dissolves. The you of yesterday no longer exists, and the you of tomorrow is just imagination. You realize you are not in competition with the world, nor even with yourself. You are simply unfolding, moment by moment, according to a rhythm deeper than will or desire. And then comes the next revelation, the death of choice. The realization that even the decisions you believed were yours were never truly yours. You see that the partners you chose, the careers you pursued, the dreams you built, all were shaped by unconscious forces. Family expectations, cultural conditioning, childhood wounds. The hidden machinery of the psyche moved you like a marionette. Jung called this the puppet revelation. The moment you realized you were not the dancer, you were being danced. Your choices were patterns. Your freedom was programming. This truth can crush the ego. It feels as though the ground of agency has vanished. And in a sense, it has. The one who believed it was in control dissolves, and with it goes all the artificial motivation to strive, to choose, to conquer. But in the ashes of that collapse, something profound emerges. A quieter, deeper will. Not the will of the ego, which wants to possess, but the will of the self, which simply expresses. This is not the end of movement. It's the end of illusionary movement. Action still happens, but it flows from awareness, not from comparison. Decisions still occur, but they arise naturally, not from control. You begin to live in alignment with a greater intelligence, something that moves through you rather than being directed by you. The puppet awakens, and though the strings remain, they no longer bind. They become threads of destiny, guided by something far beyond the personal self. This is what mystics meant when they said, "When I stopped choosing, life began to choose for me." It's terrifying for the ego, but liberating for the soul. Because when comparison and false choice die, the true movement of being is finally free to begin. There comes a point in awakening when the final illusion shatters. The illusion that something is wrong with you, with others, or with life itself. All along, you believed your suffering was a sign that something was broken, that you needed to heal, to evolve, to reach a higher version of yourself. Your entire existence revolved around becoming better, wiser, freer, always somewhere ahead of now. But then, something extraordinary happens. You stop, and in that stillness you see, nothing was ever broken. Reality is already whole, perfect, even in its chaos. This realization is not intellectual, it's existential. You feel the perfection woven into everything. The pain, the loss, the confusion, the beauty. Each moment stands complete in itself, needing no improvement. There are no mistakes, only unfolding patterns of meaning too vast for the mind to grasp. This is what Jung called the perfection recognition, the moment when consciousness no longer divides the world into what is and what should be. The ego cannot tolerate this truth. Its entire identity is built on fixing, chasing, improving. It needs problems to survive, because problems give it purpose. Without something to solve, it loses its sense of self. And so, when awakening brings the awareness that nothing needs fixing, the mind panics. It feels like paralysis. You no longer know what to do, what to pursue, or what to change. You watch the world rushing to repair itself. Political movements, spiritual quests, personal goals, and feel unable to join the frenzy. But what looks like paralysis is not death, it's peace. The same peace that mountains know, the same peace that oceans carry in their depth. You have stepped out of humanity's collective addiction to self-improvement. You see the madness of trying to fix life while standing inside the perfection of it. This is where a new kind of movement is born. Movement without motive. You begin to act, but not from lack. You create, but not from insecurity. You move, but not from fear. It's what Jung called action without motivation, a natural expression of being, like a flower blooming or a river flowing. The tree doesn't grow because it lacks something. It grows because growth is its nature. Likewise, you act, not to become perfect, but because you already are. From this realization, compassion deepens. You no longer judge others for being unawakened. You see them as expressions of the same wholeness, just playing out different forms of remembering. You don't try to change people. You radiate presence and change happens naturally around you. This state cannot be faked. You can't pretend that nothing needs fixing. You can only see it when your vision clears. And when you do, life itself changes texture. The ordinary becomes sacred. Silence feels alive. Action feels effortless. You understand, finally, what all mystics meant when they said, "The world was never imperfect, only your eyes were." And with that, the final layer of striving dissolves. You stop trying to heal because there's nothing to heal. You stop seeking purpose because being itself is purpose. You stop trying to fix life because life was never broken. You simply live, fully, freely, without resistance, not chasing completion, but expressing the completeness that was always there. So if you feel empty, if your drive is gone, if you can't make yourself care about anything, you're not broken. You're being remade. This is what Jung called the sacred paralysis, the stillness between the death of the false self and the birth of the real one. Don't try to force motivation back. Don't try to fix the void. Instead, wait, watch, listen, because soon something deeper will begin to move through you. Something not driven by fear or ambition, but by truth itself. Subscribe and stay with me as we keep exploring Jung's hidden teachings. and learn how to live, act, and create from the power of being, not becoming.